Want to be perfect? Then think again. Think about being you and allow yourself to flourish and radiate what you are and who you are. Because today is about finding your voice. And today's speaker, she's an incredible lady. She's fun, she's charming, she's energetic, she's got a big heart, and she's got the ability to create lasting change. Now, I've got a feeling this is going to be optimistic, to say the least. Make comments, ask questions. You're going to get your chance to do that. Now, she's cool, she's trendy. She is Heather Wright. Please, there you are, Heather. Good to see you again.
Hello, James. It's good to be here.
I told you, folks. I told you she was cool. There's a couple of comments that's coming in already. Let's see what we've got. Rachel Woods, you were first to go. There you go. Looking forward to hearing about the 5 areas I need to work on. And I'm pleased it's only 5 that she says. So you're going to be sharing your insights on this, on finding your voice. And then we're going to have some Q&A there in about 38 minutes time. I'll leave you to do that.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Yeah, Rachel, only 5. But, I started doing this kind of stuff. I say doing this kind of stuff, 25 years ago or so. Okay. And I was a little bit lost at the time. I was together. I was happy. I was that, but there was something missing. And I met someone and they gave me a message, and the message seemed to be, or I got involved in that message that was what I would think of as the PMA message. All you need is a positive mental attitude and the world will fall at your feet, and it's like, and it was great. It seemed great. But I'm really quite cynical sometimes. And I fell into that. And it was brilliant. And there were people on stage doing the on stage on a regular basis. I'm sure we've all seen them. And there's some brilliant, brilliant speakers out there. But gradually I became a little bit kind of, disillusioned is probably the wrong word, but I thought there's more to it, because actually the idea that just be positive and everything will fall in your lap, it's a bit like people say you must visualize your goal and you'll definitely get it. And then we watch the Olympics and you think, well, there's only one gold medal. What if they all visualized it? And it became all quite complicated for me. And I thought, oh no. And so just by the way, that slide there is me doing a flying kick, but when I was much younger. I don't do that so much anymore. But I bought my son this book one Christmas because he's a little bit of a, well, what could you say? He's a bit argumentative when he's a kid, right? Better than are. And I love the title of it. I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that. And it's a little bit like when you're having a discussion around the dinner table and everybody's had a few drinks and everybody wants to pin the message on one thing. And you just want to go, I think you'll find it's a little bit more complicated than that. A little bit like when my younger son said when he got older, he wanted to own a toy shop so he could give all the toys away to children. Marvelous idea. I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that, my boy. But there we go. So when we talk about this, my question has got to be, what are we aiming for? Everything we're aiming for in life moves towards, actually, I think, you can tell me what you think, but I think it's feel-good factor. We want to feel good. We're either moving away from pain or towards pleasure. So what we want is something that we can focus on, because you can't just go, well, I'll focus on happiness. I mean, that's a great idea. We could maybe sit up on a mountaintop and just get rid of everything else. But I don't know. I think I'd be a bit lonely. I'm a bit extrovert. I like people around me. You might be the same, or you might think that's a great idea. But I like this quote by Jane Fonda. She said, the challenge is not to be perfect, it's to be whole. And I wonder how many of you spend a lot of time worrying about the right decision, the right thing to do. What if people think this? What if people think that? And I certainly I'm a real people pleaser. I bet there are a few more people pleasers out there. I want to make people happy. But you can't make all of the people happy all of the time. And so it was really, really difficult. So I started to look at this and say, well, what is it? In order for me to be confident enough to speak out, my question is, do you know what you stand for? Do you know what you stand up for? Because as a people pleaser, someone like that, someone like me, I've got quite opinionated ideas, but I don't like to rock the boat. And if somebody's being a bit rude or a bbit one of the sexist or racist or something, and it's all being very friendly, there's a side of me says, I want to stand up for that. There's a side goes, oh, well, it's that atmosphere. I don't want to be the one. I don't want to be that guy. So I started to look at that. And there was another quote that came to me Norman Schwarzkopf said, leadership is about two things, character and strategy. And if you must be without one, be without the strategy. And I thought, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Although I'm not sure I want to follow him into war without a strategy, but he's saying it's about character. So then the question is, what is that? So then you start to look and you go, what is it we need to be successful? What is it? Now, I'm not going to say these are definitely the 5 things. I would love to, but I'm too cynical for that. I go, it would be lovely to hear what you think. What maybe I might have missed out of this. Have I covered it all? But for me, there are 5 areas when I'm talking to people, when I'm coaching somebody, 5 areas I really want to explore with them so that they can achieve that, so they can find their voice, so they can be, so they can become whatever it is. So finding your voice, well, it wouldn't be a great speech or whatever if it wasn't an acronym, a cheesy acronym, I know. Okay, so the V is going to stand for values. Now, in the 1990s, around 1994, there was a book came out called Built to Last. I'll bet many of you are familiar with it. And I want to take a little bit from that because I want to take that a little bit further, because Built to Last talks about what was it that made organizations successful and built to last. And they actually didn't come up with values. What they actually said was ideology. It was around about the 1994 that people they seized on that. And I think they didn't like the word ideology. So everybody started doing values in business. But ideology is probably a better word. But so if we use the word values, but know that what we're talking about is this ethos, this way of living, let me link the business side to the personal side, because that's really, really important. So in this book, basically the research, which was years of research by Collins and Porras, years of research, they said organizations built to last are built on a core. They're built on a core, and that core is your raison d'etre, your purpose or whatever, or as we're saying now, your ideology or the business's ideology. Outside of that was the strategy. And what they said was the strategy changes, but the core never does. Okay, the core never does. And there was all sorts of things in there. Okay, I mean, here are just a few examples of core purposes. 3M was to solve unsolved problems innovatively. Hewlett-Packard to make technical contributions to the welfare and advancement of humanity. You can see it's all hearts and minds when it comes to this sort of thing. The strategy might be different. Then there's Sony's to experience the joy of advancing and applying technology for the benefit of the public. Or Walmart, I love this, to give ordinary folk the chance to buy the same things as rich people. Learjet's third aisle on the right, everybody. Thank you very much. Nike to experience the emotion of competition and winning and I can't say it. I've got too excited. To experience the emotion of competition and winning and crushing competitors. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay, so those are just some core purposes. And of course, there's more to it than that. But let's go back to this bit. You've got your core in the center, the values, the vision, the ideology. Outside, you've got the strategy. That's the bit that changes. This model for me was a business model originally. Then I looked at it as a relationship model, i.e., if you and I build core, then sometimes the strategy can change. We might have a bit of a row. We might have we've all got friends like that. We've all got a friend maybe that you could say anything to and they wouldn't take offense. We've got a lot on the other side. Yeah. And that's because I would say we have core with them. We've built them. The reason is they know us. They know when we turn around and say, do you know that thing you did? That wasn't so good. We know that we're not saying you are no good. We're saying, actually, that thing you did, that wasn't, you're not worthy of it, so it's not worthy of you. But then I started to look at this and I say, actually, it's a personal model. What's your core? What defines you? How do you define yourself? So here's a thought process, and I just want you to think about this. If you define yourself by anything that you cannot control, that can be taken away from you, then it's always going to breed fear. What if? What if it's taken away? We did a lot of work in the early days with lots of sports people. And I remember asking a particularly famous golfer about his goals. And he gave me lots of goals, but they were all about golf. I said, what about family? What about relationships? Oh, no, I'm a golfer. The challenge was, shortly after that, he had a really bad injury and was unable to play golf. And inside his head, he lost himself. And we hear this quite a lot. sports people who have worked really, really hard to get maybe to the Olympics, they either did or didn't achieve their gold. And then afterwards, where are they? Who are they? What do you do with that? So we have to work on what really defines us. And through that, we get resilience and we start to get our voice. Because when you put your head down on the pillow at night, it's you have to live with. So I guess the question is, who in those real moments of challenge? And again, we hear it a lot in business. We have a business that does something and the spokesperson comes on the TV and says what the shareholders want them to say. And
Okay, team. It looks like we've got a little bit of a hiccup there. There's plenty of comments that's coming in. What's been most interesting so far? Actually, the lessons from good to great. Let's get some comments that we've got coming in here. Afternoon. This is great content. That's from a LinkedIn user. Thank you very much, LinkedIn user. Fabulous energy she always is. She'll be back with us any second. Thank you, Heather Wright, for sharing your wisdom today. Let's see what else we've got in here. We know where people are from. We've got sunny Somerset, Leicestershire. Where are people tuning in from? We've got someone here from Canada. Action Coach Canada, of course. Thank you at James Vincent for being a world-class leader. Oh, give over whoever that is. Thank you very much. It is well received. A warm hello from sunny Guildford. Right, let's get the learning points in then, folks. Talk about this subject. Let me put that on there. Resilience. What is resilience? That's a question to you all. And I'll go with a little mini answer as well. Oh, here she is. She's back. We've got it.
my apologies for that. Can you hear me? Am I back in?
We run live. We run live. This is all part of the fun. It's all part of the show.
Dear me. I had all my tech health checked yesterday, but there you go. Quite deliberately. So
back over to you, Heather.
Thank you very much. Well, I have not really any idea exactly where I dropped out there. I'm hoping it was a little bit about the resilience piece. It was about finding your voice. And I hope that you heard me say anything that defines you, if you measure yourself by anything that can be taken away from you by an external source, then there's always going to be some fear. So the idea here is to have something within us. When we put our head down the pillow at night, we've only got ourselves to live up to right at the end. Okay. And I was talking about that, and that gives us a certain amount of resilience because actually we're not so worried about everything else. And then what I was trying to do, I was trying to show you this lady. You may have heard of the Angels of Woolwich. The day that Gunnar Lee Rigby was unfortunately murdered, this wonderful lady, Ingrid Luya Kennett, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I believe it has a French side to it, was on a bus and she looked out and she thought, there's nobody there to protect people. This was before the emergency services arrived. She thought people might get hurt. When she was interviewed later, they said, why did you get off the bus and talk to a man with a knife in his hand, which had the guy's blood on it? There were also two other women who were driving past who stopped their car, got out and asked the killer's permission to sit with Lee Rigby. Now, my question again, when we talk about what defines us, is in those moments of absolute pressure, I'm sure we'd all love to feel like we would be brave enough to do that. I have no idea. I've never been in that situation particularly. But my thought process is, when she was interviewed, somebody said to her, did you do it because you've got a strong religion, blah, blah, blah. She said, no, I did it because it just felt like the right thing to do. She did it because of who she was. Now, later on, by the way, she did suffer from PTSD and all sorts of things. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. It's about what values do you stand for? Now, when I ask leaders in business, what do they stand for? Most of them cannot articulate it. It's not they don't have anything they stand for. It's that they can't articulate it. And I think as a leader, as a thought leader, even as a human being, it's really important to be able to clearly articulate it. So it's about spending some time with that. And when we talk about it, and I've talked about an ideology rather than values, it's not a series of just theoretical words. You know, I believe in trust, I believe in honesty. It's more than that. So if you agree with me, and please feel free to put stuff in, you know, what do you think? Okay. This is what I suggest people do. And it's just a thought process here. So bear with it, because you've got to, as with all of these things, it's a bit more complicated than that. You have to work on it. Okay. You have to drill the skill. Okay. So this was something I started to draw up. Okay. I share with you mine, not because I think they are the ultimate, but because I can't share with you anybody else's. That would be rude. And under confidential. Okay. But I looked at these and I said, there are 5 areas that I think are really, really important to me. And you'll notice they're not single words. They're not just concepts. There's not honesty. So the ask honest questions for me is I ask 3 questions, preferably before I speak, if I get a chance. Okay. Is it the truth? Is it kind? Is it helpful? So there's a piece in there which is more than just I'm an honest person, because I tell you what, honesty is one of the hardest ones. As soon as you start saying to people, I'm going to be honest, you can really start to pick holes in it. And I was amazed a little while ago, we got burgled at home. And it was amazing how many people who believe themselves to be honest said to me, you did make sure that you claimed for all the things, you know, all the things that went missing, like that extra iPad. And I was really surprised. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. It's just the insurance companies. Whoa. What do you believe about yourself? So when we do this, the idea is to find, I would say, some themes and to be able to articulate them. But we don't just articulate them as words. We have to articulate them as stories. So I've just given you a story and I've given you an idea. And I could also back everything up here with, in this situation, I have done this. Now, it's really important. It's not just in this situation, I want to do this. It's in this situation, I've experienced this. And plus in that, there's probably the thing that drives it might very well be that in a situation, once upon a time, you let yourself down and you thought, I don't want to do that again. So I've occasionally come away from a situation and thought I should have spoken up. But I didn't. Why didn't I? And in actual fact, that experience makes me go, I've got to be a better person. So I asked these 3 questions. Why is that value or part of the ideology important to me? Why is it important to me? Somebody once said to me, they said, oh, honesty is very, very important. And I said, why? Tell me why honesty is important. And he thought for a while. And he thought, and I gave him the space. And then all of a sudden he went, because mum said so. It's not quite the reason we're after. Okay. The next thing is, what does it actually mean? Because these things are often really conceptual. We have to be able to define them by behaviors, not by some loose theory that doesn't seem to mean anything. So in what situation does it matter? And what's the story behind it? And then the next piece is the how, because you don't just decide this overnight and then all of a sudden, boom, it's all deeply ingrained. We have to practice it. We have to be put in situations where we are challenged or we challenge ourselves. So really important. So I'm going to spend more time on the ideology piece than any of the rest, really, because I think that's the foundation. For me, that's the security and the resilience to step up. Like I say, what do you stand up for? And if you're a leader in business, do your team know what you stand for? Do they know what they can come to you for? Do they know what is important to you? And I mean personally, and I know there can often be a bit of a separation there. Well, obviously it's the organizational goals. They probably know what those are. But do they know who you are? We all know that the leaders that we truly want to follow, it's because of who they are, not necessarily what they do. And the nice thing about this is you can make a mistake as a leader, provided people know who you are, because they go, oh, that was just a mistake. They wouldn't normally do that. If you don't and they don't know it, then they go, oh, that defines them. They're definitely, and they start to read into it, what we call the intention invention. See, I believe we should have character goals. Goals are brilliant. I think goals are really, really important, but I believe we should have character goals, character aspirations. And that will help us with the first step of our voice. So going on to the second step of our voice, we said there were 5, optimism. Now, I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on optimism because I know that you will have heard messages about being optimistic before. It is really, really important. You can call it optimism, you call it being positive. For me, it's a little bit more than that. I think optimism is actually about having really strong self-esteem to the point where you want to develop yourself. You want to be a better, every day you'd like to be a little bit better. And you might have a personal development plan, you know, and again, I know organizations do this. I mean, personally, you know, I love to learn to sing. It doesn't mean necessarily I'm going to become a singer, you know, and all of those kind of things. So personal development is really important, but it means, are we solution focused? So optimism is important. Do we understand that? Do we understand enough about the way the brain is wired? And I've done a session for Action Coach before, and I believe it's live, and you're probably able to see it on video, when we talk about the connections in the brain and how to really build habits. Optimism is a habit. Martin Seligman, and many of you will have heard of his book, Learned Optimism. That's great. That's brilliant. We can learn it, okay? So we need to understand what we're doing to the brain when we're thinking particular things, the chemicals that are coming from the brain. And we need to understand how to build habits. Habits are really, really important. Good habits, choices are habits. And we have 3 types of habits. We have physical habits, we have emotional habits, and we have thought processing habits. So in order for us to become more optimistic and more positive and more solution focused, in order for us to bounce back when things get tough, because they do, we actually have to build the right habits of thought processes. We have to move away from that moment. You know, when we get knocked back and we're living in the moment of the pain, and all we want to do is protect ourselves. Just go, no, protect ourselves. Imagine you've gone into a meeting, you had a brilliant idea, you were sure it was a brilliant idea, you were hoping that everybody would not quite fall down and worship, but go, wow! And you put the idea out, and there's a silence. And there's always one around the table who has to make a quip. And then someone's a little bit cynical, and your idea falls flat, and everybody's laughing because it was a funny joke, but wow. At that moment, what's the lesson we learn? Mostly, we often learn to protect ourselves. You hear people go, well, I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing that. Oh, there's no point having ideas when they're around. Hang on a minute. Versus the better idea, which is, maybe I need to be better at the way I put my ideas. I need to learn about how to sell it for, I don't know. But the idea is we have 2 different learnings then, ones that make us smaller and ones that make us bigger, ones that help us to grow. And that is a habit, and we have to keep going at that, okay? Again, we're back to resilience. Resilience is about coping strategies when things get tough and bouncing back, not about never having felt it in the first place. There's lots of stuff on optimism. You know that one where people go, hey, and they hold a glass out. This is a bottle, not it's a bottle. They hold a glass out. I do this quite a lot sometimes when I've got audiences who, I'm in the room with, and I hold a glass and I say, what am I going to ask? And they go, no, are you a glass half full or a glass half empty person? I go, no, I'm going to ask, how heavy is it? Because this optimism part, this way we want to program our brain is, do we understand how to put stuff down? Stuff that's in the past. Carrying regrets around becomes very, very hard. It's very, very heavy. So there's a practice in putting things down. They pop up again. It's like you clicked on them, scraped them into the recycle bin, and then they popped out again when you're about 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're, oh, I wish I'd never done that. We have to keep doing it. We have to practice, okay? We have to understand about mood management, because it affects everybody around us and it affects our decision-making, and it will affect the way we work with our ideologies and our values. If we're feeling a particular way out, if we're feeling a little bit angry and bitter. I remember one time something had happened in our business and I was feeling particularly hard done by. And somebody said, don't you want to just have a real moan about that person? And they really wanted to have a go. And I said, no, I don't want what they've done to affect me just because right now I'm hurting. Mood management is really, really important for our ability to be resilient and have mental toughness, and for us to be able to speak out in the right way. Often, you know what they say, when we say words, you can't get them back. It's like getting the toothpaste back in the tube, So our words are very powerful. So our mood management is really important. So we get our ideologies, and then our optimism needs to be focused towards those. And we need to have routines. We have to go over it. We have to have routines that go over it, thought processes we need, even generating mood. I wonder what your routine is first thing in the morning. I mean, we all have one, right? I'm pretty certain the old cleaning the teeth thing and all of that. But what's your mental routine to get yourself into the day? When I've worked with athletes, of course they have a routine. We're used to them having a routine. But you're an athlete too. It's just a different type. Do you have a pre-match prep? When you go to a meeting early and you get there and maybe you've got a presentation to do or you're going to say something, do you play email roulette? You know that? Where you go, oh, I've got time, I'll just check my emails. So you check your emails, just check my emails. Oh, there's an email from so-and-so that made me really mad. Am I now in the best mood? That's a little bit like an Olympic runner is about to set off on the blocks and their coach comes running up and goes, hey, I needed to tell you, your dog just died. You know that wouldn't happen. So we need to understand about the way our brain works with these things. We need to have a routine so that we can mold our brain into to the behaviors that we want coming from that ideology we had. Okay. And here's another one. Okay. This third area is influence. This is not about character. This is about skill. No matter how gregarious you are, no matter how introverted or extroverted, we have to acknowledge that if we are to be successful in this world, and that's however you define success, unless you're going to live on a mountain on your own, we need to have good influencing skills. We have to learn. Now, here's the really brilliant news. For those of you who are on here and going, I'm introverted, Heather, and it's really obvious for you, you're extroverted. There is massive power in introversion. Influencing skills are not necessarily about this, you know. I hate to say it because that's my area, you know. But wow, influence is really, really important. Getting rid of ego. You see, those of us who are quite gregarious can sometimes get a little bit carried away with what we have to say instead of what others have to say. This, for me, I do a lot of stuff on influencing skills in business now. And the reason for it is because it's massively needed. But for me, it was this moment where everyone said, oh, Heather, you're a good talker, oh, blah, blah. And they praised it all the time when I was growing up. Well, apart from the teachers, they weren't so keen, you know. So they praised it all the time. But the truth of the matter is that isn't what gives us influence. In fact, I think probably I cheesed a few people off. You know, I bet some of you can relate to that. You go, oh, yeah. You know, when we're chatting to somebody and they have an opinion and you have an opinion, the way to persuade them is not to just bombard them with, well, I mean, if it was as simple as I can prove you wrong and therefore you will believe me, then there'd be loads of people just changing their mind all of the time. I used to say my eldest son's very, very clever and he's a very good debater. And I used to say to him on a regular basis, when he got a little bit older and I could explain this to him, I'd say, nobody cares if you're right, if you're being a prat about it. Nobody, because you're just making them feel small. And even if what you're saying is absolutely spot on and logical, they're just going to not want to believe you. And we all know that if we don't want to believe someone, we can find a narrative that works. So we've got to get rid of ego. People like people who like them. I guess we maybe need to learn to really like people, but in order to do that, we have to see beyond some of the veneer we get. That's a hard one. I mean, admittedly, that's a hard one. We're still, don't worry, we're still not influencing skills. I guess a lot of people think it's all about wrestling. It's all about wrestling people to the ground, and that's what influence is about. In fact, recently somebody recommended a book to me. I don't know if you've read it. I think it's called How to Be Heard, and I've been listening to it, How to Be Heard. The funny thing is, the guy who did the TED Talk, How to Be Heard, also did one on listening. And the How to Be Heard gets more views than the listening one. But How to Be Heard is about listening as well. So the only way to be heard is to show that respect so that people will want to listen to you at some point and that you can relate an argument. Don't walk through somebody else's mind with our dirty feet. We love to trample on people. Well, I say we love to trample. We don't realize we're doing it. Trampling through people's mind with our dirty feet. Now, if I go back to those ideologies we talked about and those values, my question is, how do you want to make people feel? When you say what I stand for, you've got to ask yourself, how does that affect the people around me? I've found that most people, when they start to look at their values, a lot of them are related to the way they have relationships with other people. So therefore, these influencing skills are going to be really, really important, because it's actually not enough just to want people to like you and to like people. There's a skill in that. There's people who really want to do that, but they're still being defensive. They might have developed the habit of being a little bit stroppy when they were younger. And that's where the habit piece comes in. I'm hoping this is making sense. Please let me know what you think. Okay, please let me know. This is just an example. When my youngest son went to the Marines in January 2016, and this is what I would just call the tactless people when it comes to influence and not walking through somebody else's mind with your dirty feet. In 2016, my son went into the Marines. I was really, really proud. I was also really, really scared, naturally. You wouldn't believe how many people I met who said, oh, aren't you worried? Well, that's, a step in the slightly wrong direction. But the next piece was because the year before, a Marine cadet had died in training at the place my son was at. Now, did they think I didn't know that? Wow, that was an ouch, But then people, sometimes they just open their mouths and it comes out. So let's not walk through somebody's mind with our dirty feet. It's learning to listen. But here's the thing, it's learning to listen without ego. I listened to a finance guy recently who said a lovely thing. He said when he's listening to his clients, he listens with a quiet mind. Listen with a quiet mind. Now, I knew what he meant. I mean, it was, I've heard this before, but the way he said it, and I've recently found that when I'm listening, if I say that phrase, Heather, listen with a quiet mind, it silences that voice in my head that goes, what am I going to say next? Come on, we do it. What do I got to say next? Somebody has telling you a story. They're telling you a story about, I don't know, a terrible car journey. And of course, we instantly go, oh, I've got a story. Me too. So this is about listening with a quiet mind and not being frightened of the silence, not being frightened of looking someone in the eye and just going, wow, that was interesting. That was fascinating. Thank you. This is not something that came naturally to me. I was very much a me too. I've got a story. Let me tell you my story. When I'm not actually speaking to camera or at conferences and training courses, things like this, I'm massively quieter now. Is that grammatically okay? Massively quieter? That doesn't sound right. I'm definitely more quiet. Yeah. Because I'm really working on this and I hear so much more powerful. So what are the skills we need in influencing skills? I think if we had a list of influencing skills, the ability to sell, not gabby, persuasion type sales skills, negotiation psychology. There's some great stuff out there on negotiation, which is, again, I'm talking about, there's a guy called Chris Voss in Masterclass, who's an FBI hostage negotiator, very much on the listening side of negotiation. But as he has been in those massively high risk situations where he could have got shot, I'm going to trust he absolutely knows what he's talking about. Brilliant guy. I don't know if you've heard of Chris Voss, put a yes in the chat, or if not, make a note. Brilliant stuff. Networking, making friends, the ability to go. Networking went out of fashion for a little while, didn't it? We used to go networking sessions and lots of us were really frightened. Whenever I ask somebody why they're frightened of networking, they always say, I'm worried about I don't know what to say. It's not about what you say. It's about what you ask, and it's about listening. Yeah, it's about listening and then being interested in people. I mean, even if you go back to Dale Carnegie's book in the 1920s, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he said this. The message hasn't always got through, has it? It can take a while, yeah. Handling difficult conversations. So many people, their emotions get in the way. Their emotions get in the way because they're worried. I often find in business when I do handling difficult conversations and I say to people, right, so this situation has happened and you've got to deal with it. What are you busy preparing for? What I have to tell them. What you have to find out. You have to be curious. Chris Voss says this in one of his videos. He says, if you're curious, you can't be angry. And if you're curious, you can't be sad. When he first said it, I really wasn't sure. I thought, I'm sure I can be all of those things at once. I'm sure I can. Actually, I tried it. Of course he's right. Of course he's right. He knows what he's talking about. So we become curious. When we're handling a difficult conversation, we go in with curiosity. These are really powerful influence skills. If there's anyone there, who's listening today, and you've never, ever had to have a difficult conversation, or you've never even had to avoid one, then well done you. I'm pretty certain all of us at some point. Something they should probably have to teach us at school. Yeah. So it's really powerful. Coaching. We have to learn to forage, not fix. This is all about the listening thing, isn't it? And basically general interpersonal skills when we walk into a room. Influencing skills will underpin our ideology. If we want to live our ideology, if we want to find our voice, if we want to speak clearly and we have a message, and that message isn't necessarily from a mountaintop, you might not be Martin Luther King, but when we find our voice, our influencing skills will make that voice land. Battering people to death with our thoughts won't. Words change worlds. Words are, you know, that sticks and stones will break my bones and all of that kind of stuff. We say that to children to try and help them, you know, get over some cruel child in the playground. But of course, as adults, we actually know that sticks and stones may break my bones, but I'll actually probably get over it. But words could live with me forever and it might haunt me. So words change worlds. Your words can change worlds. Doesn't matter what it says on your business card. We choose our words very carefully. So influencing skills are really, really important. So far, we've had ideology. We've had this optimistic mindset, or rather a solution-focused mindset, an ability to bounce back and learn the lessons when it's tough, and influencing skills to make them land. Here's our fourth: commitment. Commitment. We need to be committed to something. And it might be cyclical, this. It might be that you're committed to your ideology. I don't know. But commitment gives us purpose. Purpose is very powerful. And there's many, I'm sure you've heard many speakers talk about goals and purpose, so I won't spend masses of time on it, but it's really important to know what we stand for. Helen Keller said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. That commitment, that stepping out, that bravery, it doesn't mean we have to jump out of mountains, or, out of helicopters and on mountains and things like this. But sometimes that bravery is standing up for something, or choosing to go for a job that maybe downsizing. We're going, I've got this job, it's really, really well paid, but actually I always wanted to have a craft stall. I don't know. Keep bees. I don't know. Yeah. Because mediocrity isn't worth getting out of bed for. We need something that drives us and gets us out of bed. And our ideology will make us who we are. And this will give us that purpose to move forward. And it can be lots of little things. Our purpose, our commitment can be lots of little things, or it could be one big thing. Again, some great stuff on whether or not we want one big goal, I'm going to cure cancer, or whether it's going to be lots of little goals, that's fine. Sometimes they're only personal goals as well. This is a picture of me doing a bungee jump, and 4 black belts I got when I was younger and obsessed with the martial arts and things like that. It just shows a distinct lack of imagination, of hobbies, really. But they're just little bits that tell the story. You're creating a story. You're creating your story. What's it going to be like? What's the ending going to be like? I'll tell you one thing, though. In Helen Keller's daring adventure, know this. In every daring adventure, at some moment in that story, the hero will be clinging to the cliff tops by their fingertips, waiting to be rescued. There will be tough times, but that's what makes it a story. And we have to keep focused. We deviate from our commitment and purpose because of that fear. What if it never happens? So commitment. And finally, all of this is pinned together. We can't do anything without energy. Energy gives us action. We have to take action. And again, that doesn't mean we have to run a marathon. It could be picking up the phone, but we have to take action. I believe everybody has an energy bucket. An energy bucket, right? And it's metaphorical, this, by the way. I just mentioned that. Okay, everybody's got an energy bucket, but it's a different size for different people. Some people have a smaller one, but we've got to keep the energy bucket topped up. So your bucket will spring holes. I don't know about you, but when I've got no energy, I find it difficult to even make a decision about what I want to have for my dinner. So Lord knows I'm going to make a big decision about career or the business or anything like that. So we need to learn to plug the holes and put more stuff in. If we have to keep the energy bucket full, there are 2 ways. We plug holes or we put more in the top, preferably both. So we have to do stuff that fills our energy, that generates. You will have friends who are energy drains. You'll have heard this before. You're energy drains. You'll have people who give you energy. I've got a picture of a friend of mine in my head at the moment. I'm sure you have. The person who, and I'll bet you when times are tough, they'll be the person that you haven't seen for ages. And you'll go and see them. You say, you know what, we should have done this. We should do this more regularly. I don't know why we're not doing it. That's often the way. We end up spending more time with the ones that are creating holes in our energy bucket. So it's just a little plan. If you're ever doodling, I draw a little picture that looks a bit like a bucket. Well, it looks like a rectangle with a squidgy end and a bigger end. That's what it looks like. And I draw the holes in at any one moment. And I draw how big they are at that moment. And then I label them, so-and-so in the office who's always a bit miserable, who drains me, and this thing that's happening, or an injury I've got. And some of them will be temporary. So if you've got an injury, for instance, and you're into sport, it'll be temporary. There's an acceptance. There's a wonderful, wonderful question when I was looking at a documentary about Sky cycling team. And the Sky cycling team psychologist said to this cyclist, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And the cyclist said, well, I'm probably about a 4. And he said, well, why are you a 4? He said, well, I'm injured at the moment and I'm not on the team. And he said, all right, I've got a couple of questions for you that are really, really important. First one, are you getting the best medical advice you possibly can? Well, this is Sky TV. It's Sky, do you imagine they're paying a fortune for the medical advice? So he said, yes, I am. He said, are you paying attention to it and doing everything you can to heal? He said, yes. He said, in that case, the reason you're not happy is not because you're injured. It's because you have not accepted the situation. Yeah. Now, this is going to sound quite dramatic, but a little while ago, one of my sons was hospitalized. The one who'd been in the Marines, well, he hadn't been in the Marines at this point, and he got something called ITP. It meant it's a little bit like when your blood vessels all start to burst and your blood won't clot. And the doctor came and kind of said, well, this is very, very serious. It's very, very serious. And I went home, and at the time he was hospitalized, he was on his way to a martial arts lesson. If he'd have been kicked in the head that day, it would have been lights out. And I lay in bed and I just went, oh boy, I'm so stressed. I'm so worried. I'm worried about what's going to happen. And I asked myself that question: is he getting the best medical advice possible? Well, it turned out locally there was an expert on this particularly rare disease. I said, and is he doing everything he possibly can? Yes. In that case, I need to accept the situation and stop thinking, what if? Now, that's a hard one. Woo! That's a hard one. But we learn. We get better at these things because we have to practice them. We may not always do it, but we have to practice them. So we have to keep our energy high so that we can have action, so that we can do things. And in order to do that, we have to learn to accept some situations, change some situations, and indeed sometimes say no to things that drain us. So when I say find your voice, that for me, those are the 5 things we could be working on. I wonder if you think I've missed anything out, or if there's something, admittedly, in a short space of time, this is probably a 3-volume novel, but I wonder if you would add anything to that. But remember this: when you put your head down on the pillow at night, it's you have to answer to. Back to you, James.
What a wonderful human being you are, Heather Wright. The comments box has been going wild actually behind the scenes. So we've got a few questions lined up for you. I want to hear your questions and comments. Where do we start on this? I made some notes here as you were going. Listen without ego. Listen with a quiet mind. It takes some digesting that. It's worthwhile sort of pondering on for a second. How do you do that? How do you listen with a quiet mind?
That's an interesting one, because I was told by a guy, the guy tried to teach me to meditate once, and I really struggle with it, because even when I'm going, keep your mind quiet, I feel like I'm just going to keep my mind quiet, but I have actually started to do that since that guy said that. If you take a deep breath when somebody's talking and you go, listen with a quiet mind, and then you focus on the words, then the words start to come back into your head. You have to go, okay, do it again, until eventually you get less and less and less noise. I've not quite fully got there yet, but I am so much better.
There's something in it, isn't there? The sort of whole breathing, relaxation, just, relaxed and alertness. A lot of psychologists talk about. Maybe the acceptance is something as well of listening with a quiet mind. You hit us with a big one there. At the end, you've not.
Yes, sorry about that. Just as we're finishing, I'll just hit you with a big one. But the acceptance is really, really important. My mum always says she doesn't like having her photograph taken. She says, I don't take a good photo. She doesn't like I don't take a good photo. And we have a good jokey relationship. She said, Mum, that's what you look like. If we get worried about photos of ourselves, we have to understand that we have to accept what we look like. We're so busy trying to be somebody else, trying to be always perfect and all that, rather than that acceptance of who we are. Admittedly, I believe we should be striving to be a better person. Yeah. But there also has to be, I know I'm always going to have some flaws. It doesn't mean I'm going to ignore them, but there is an acceptance piece in there.
Yeah, without doubt, I think when you can accept it, you're free, aren't you? You're kind of free to think differently. What we've got here: action coach, challenge coach. S. Voices understand you'll have your own saboteurs who will try to
Oh,
distract you and add no value. Talking about self-sabotage there, I do believe. Got a question for
yeah.
you as well. Any comment on
Mhm.
the self-sabotage piece there?
Yeah, there's a piece. So I would put that bit under the optimism piece, just because when you understand your sabotage, so the optimism piece is about your mindset, really, isn't it?
Mm.
It's about getting the right mindset. So yes, understanding that and knowing your own beliefs. So when we talk about those, when I said we have habits, we also have habitual beliefs as well. Oh, I'm always doing that. Oh, I'm always doing that. So when it says understand you'll have your own saboteurs, I absolutely get that, and it is really important to understand what they are and go, do you know what? I keep doing that to myself, don't I? And then we wonder, well, what is it I believe that makes me do that? And it might be, well, I keep, for instance, I used to be the nightmare for just opening my mouth and cracking a joke at an inappropriate time.
Right.
And somewhere in there's a belief that says, if I'm not cracking a joke, nobody will like me. If I'm not being funny, nobody will like me. And it undermined my ability to be sympathetic.
Right.
And so that was sabotaging my ability to be me. And so I was okay, and I had to let it go. And I don't have to be the funniest person in the room now. I mean, I've just like I say, I nearly always am, but just joking. Just joking.
Yeah, well, look, thanks for sharing that. I like the honest, reflective example. Actually, the example speaks volumes really for who you are. So, if we look at this finding your voice piece that you've gone with the acronym,
Mhm.
is that a short-term project, a long-term project? There'll be people on here that wants to do this all straight away. I mean, what's your response to that?
I'm going to use that old adage that says nothing good comes easily. It's a long-term project. But the really amazing thing is, once you've worked out what your ideology, whatever your 5 themes or whatever they are, and you've worked out the sort of person you want to be, you make massive strides at the beginning. There are times when you go, oh, I let myself down, but we mustn't let that knock us, because that's just an illustration that we're now aware of it as well. So it's very much a long-term project, but you can make a lot of progress at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's probably understated the motivation and the your desire that comes from actually just getting started on it.
Yeah, and that the desire. You see, again, here's a really silly little example. When my eldest son was teaching my youngest son school stuff, because my eldest one really bright, youngest one struggled with dyslexia, and he was getting really mad with him because he was about 13. I said, "What is your purpose in doing this?" And he said, "Well, he's got to get the right answer." I said, "No, your purpose is to make him feel clever. If he feels clever, then he'll work out the answer. He'll be strong enough." And sometimes it's about that. It's about understanding. If you understand your ideology and your purpose, you step back from your behaviors that might be habitual and make you jump in. We just have to get the right answer. Actually, no, we don't. We have to get there the right way.
It's amazing how much both strength and clarity you get when you clear on your purpose for anything, a small thing or something big in life. So
Yes,
look at the
absolutely.
question there on screen. So who's the most real person that you've ever met and why?
Well, instantly, there's a person that comes to mind, and he used to be the HR director of Boots, the chemist.
Right.
And he had 75,000 people he had to look after. His name was Pradip Patel. And when I met him, his predecessor had been, you could never get hold of them. They were always busy. They were full of stuff, and they were quite a strong character. And he had a quiet presence and a quiet energy. And I never heard anybody, and let's face it, there were a lot of people there. I never heard anybody say anything nasty about him ever. He would get up every morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning and meditate. He was a Tibetan Buddhist, and he would meditate for 3 hours on who he wanted to be and all sorts of stuff. And he said to me, he's not always been like that. He had to learn to do it. So I'd never met him when he wasn't like that. I would have been fascinated to have seen the change, but he was always very, very real. He was always very considered. When you had a conversation with him, he made you want to please him. He just made you want to please him. And I asked to other people, and they felt the same. And he was very real and very honest. And I once went to him and was asking him for a little piece of advice. This was after he left Boots. And I said, "There's some stuff that's happened, Pradip, and I'm sorry, as I tell you, I might get a bit upset." And he just said, "Heather, If there are tears, there are tears. It doesn't matter. Carry on.
Sounds like an amazing guy.
Great guy.
All right, next thing. There's loads of comments that are coming in here as well. And you mentioned this during your talk. You mentioned this during our last talk, and it really kind of stuck with me. So talk to us about drilling the skill.
Okay. 101 neurology. We create pathways in the brain. We create them mostly through our thoughts, but there's various different ways to do it, but we create them through our thoughts. The point is we want to create those pathways. Those pathways build up like trying to clear a pathway through a forest. So when we learn to do something new, it's not one of the challenges I find often in business is we want somebody to change their behavior. Maybe we decide, I think the example I probably gave last time was some engineers I was working with, and they wanted them to collaborate, and they defined what they wanted them to do. They're not stupid people. They knew what they wanted to do. They defined it, but they weren't doing it. And so they brought me in and they said, Heather, motivate them. I said, that's a little bit of an insult. You think they're not collaborating because they just don't want to, like small school children. A lot of our behaviors aren't because we don't want to. It's purely because we've got other habits that are the path more well-traveled, or if you like. And therefore, the idea is we have to drill the skill. If you were learning a new skill in any sort of physical sport, you would drill it. Well, thought processes and values are the same. So listening with a quiet mind is a great example. Even learning to care about people weirdly can be a skill. So we have to actually drill it. So we become aware of the thought process that's going on. We decide what it needs to be, and we actually sort of have to force the pathway. And once we've cleared that pathway, it becomes the path least traveled. It becomes the path of least resistance. And that's when the change starts to happen.
You see, I like the point that you made there, and you kind of made it quite subtly, and you're forcing yourself down a new route. How important is that sort of mentality then? I mean, what does it take to force yourself down a new route?
Well, that's when you do need the motivation. So often the thing that does that, it will be, and you can use push or pull motivation. This is the person I want to be. And you have, again, I mentioned a guy called Chris Voss. He has a wonderful saying. He says, vision creates the decision. Now, he's actually referring to getting people to give themselves up when they're going to shoot people. But vision creates a decision. He says you have to draw a vision of what potentially their behavior could be and get them to do it. So we can use pull motivation, but we can also use push motivation, which is the embarrassing times we've let ourselves down when we've done that. But we must not allow the negatives to define us. Just because we did it doesn't mean it defines us. So we force the pathway, and we just keep going down, because I think one of the challenges can be, if, for instance, if you meet someone who's a little bit rude, it doesn't mean they are rude. It might mean that they've developed a habit when they were growing up. Maybe they lived in a household where everybody talked to each other like that. So it doesn't mean they have an intention of being rude, because there's an absolute skill in that. They might really, really like people and not know why other people aren't responding that way. And we've often get that with leaders in business when they get really frustrated and they end up sort of saying, well, just do it. And that's because it's faster.
Surely in most walks of life then, there's a real disconnect between intention and actions or behaviors there just because of habit. Because, no one's going to intend to do the wrong thing or, to make bad choices, because that's what you're talking about here, is making good choices and forcing yourself down a new route until you've got the habit.
Very much so, very much so. But we do have to practice it. Like we say, we have to force it down the new route. And we have to also, here's another thing, we have to relive the good decisions. And when we're reliving the good decisions, it's not because we're being boastful, and we don't have to necessarily tell everybody else, but we are again drilling the skill. So we think about the things we did right, and we reinforce them, and we reinforce them. You'll probably be aware, many people will be aware of the thing called appreciative inquiry, which is where you focus so hard on your strengths, your weaknesses become irrelevant. And that, I'm not suggesting we never, ever do any weakness stuff. Of course, if you're a surgeon. Yeah.
It's really powerful what you say, and I was digesting it then. When you focus really hard on your strengths, your weaknesses become absolutely irrelevant. It's so true.
Yeah.
All right. Last one. Then we're going to open it up to learning points, action points, all this kind of stuff, what people have got from the session. I saw the angel in the marble and I cut away to set him free, Michelangelo. Now, I'm aware that that's one of, if not your favorite quote. Is that right?
It's my favorite leadership or personal development quote. Because I mean, although Michelangelo, of course, was literally talking about he could see as a creative person, he saw got a big lump of marble and he could see inside of it as to what he wanted to create. Now, either in leadership or in our own personal development, we have to be able to see the wonder either inside other people or inside ourselves. We've got to do that. And this is this piece when you say, is it a long-term project? We have to chip away, chip away, chip away. Now, I'm forgive me, I'm not a sculptor, but I imagine I've watched that program, the woodworkers, Handmade in Britain, where the woodworkers start with a big piece of wood, and they start by getting big chunks away first of all. So, and that's like with us, we get rid of some of the big stuff. That's the easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit. And then we gradually chip, and then we polish, and then we polish, and we do little things, and we tweak, and we tweak, and we're maybe not quite as satisfied with it. For me, that's what that's saying. And that's what this is about. We never stop developing. We don't, we're not trying to be the best. We're trying to be better.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, what you said there right at the start as well was the optimism equals personal development. That was just such a hard hitting point as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it doesn't have to. Like, I'm trying to say this isn't you have to decide that you've got a purpose that's going to change the world. We're back to that, all the lots of little things. It's almost like marginal gains. If we all did the little things, then the big things would take care of themselves.
Well, look, it's time now, folks. It's time to start putting your comments in, your learning points in, what you've got from this session, what's going to change in your world, your life, from this moment on. Do share that in the comments. I'm going to read some out in a second, so Heather's got them. Whilst you're putting them in, we're just going to give you a 40-second video of a big event that's coming to a town near you next week or the week after. Wolfster, if you can play the video, that would be great. It's a cool video. It always gets my blood flowing. So that's coming to a town near you starting next week, folks. Looking forward to seeing you there. And here's the learnings now from the session. Let's see. We've got, Bryn, you've got loads. He's putting loads in. Think, act, talk, and conduct yourself like a person you want to be. I'm going to have to go fast here because there's so many coming in. Life's project. This is Bryn again. Understand your beliefs and what you stand for in life, both personal and business. This is what makes you who you are. Rachel Woods, I am in a personal quest to be better, not the best, just better. Anu, the secret of success is found in daily routine of drilling the skill and forcing the pathway. You see, the getting your stuff in here. The challenge coach, this is Steve Gaskell, some great insights and nourishment for the mind. Thank you, Heather. Thoroughly enjoyable session. Optimism is being solution focused. Bingo. Let's keep going. Let's see. We've got John Hurley. Mood management leads to resilience that leads to mental toughness. Drew Palmer, values, optimism, influence, commitment, and energy. Reciting the voice there. Drew Palmer's found the voice, I do believe. Bryn's got loads in. I've got to read some other things that's coming out. This is another point from Anu. Hoping drains energy. Action creates energy. Check out what you said about Chris Voss earlier on as well. We had a few comments on that. So you can't be curious and angry at the same time. And you can't be curious and sad at the same time. That tells you how important curiosity is, hey?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I tell you what, I've absolutely practiced that since I heard that. And I thought, I don't know if I believed it. I tried it and I went, blimmin' hell, the guy's right. Credit where it's due. That guy knows his stuff.
Look at this, John Hurley. 2 types of learning. One makes us smaller, one makes us bigger. That's called development. John Hurley, you are a winner. Don't know who you are, but you're a winner. Action Coach Canada, progression over perfection. Good to have you here with us on the call as well, by the way, Canada. It's atomic habits that makes the difference. Cindy Nicholson. There's still coming in. Thank you, Heather, for a great session. Lots of takeaways. How to be heard is to listen. Listen with a quiet mind. It's a really good point. Do subscribe if you've not subscribed to this YouTube channel yet, and share it out with your friends as well. Wolfster, we're not quite finished yet. Wolfster, who have we got to look forward to next week? Let's get that on screen. There he is, the man of the moment, Victor Antonio. He's a cool guy as well. We've had Heather today, who's super cool. So is Victor Antonio. He's got a really amazing setup. He's here to talk about sales, getting deals unstuck, dealing with indecisive buyers, how to get more sales. That's next Friday, 4 p.m. Thank you very much, Wolfster. And let's see. Look, plenty of thank yous that's coming in here. Thank you from Rachel Woods, Steve Saunders. Great session. If you're curious, can't be angry or sad. Great way to end the week. That's from Asari St. Hill. On behalf of everybody today, thank you so much, Heather. You are a rock star. We love you.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Have a fantastic week.